You have no right to that cabin, Dad. You were never really part of this family anyway. That sentence. 31 words. My son said them standing in my own kitchen on a Tuesday afternoon in October, 3 weeks after he told me I wasn't welcome at my grandson's graduation ceremony. I didn't yell. I didn't throw him out. I just stood there holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago, and I thought, this is what 62 years of living looks like. This is what I built. Let me back up. My name is Robert. I spent 34 years working as a structural engineer in Portland, Oregon. Not glamorous work. Not the kind of job that gets you on magazine covers. But it was honest, and it paid well. And I was good at it. By the time I retired at 60, I had a modest investment portfolio, a paid-off house in southeast Portland, and a cabin up near Mount Hood, about an hour and 15 minutes from the city, sitting on 2 acres of Douglas fir in silence. I bought that cabin in 2009, during the crash, when prices dropped and most people were too scared to buy anything. I wasn't scared. I'd been saving for 15 years specifically for a moment like that. The cabin cost me $340,000 then. By last year, it had appraised at just over $1.2 million. I also had a son. His name is Derek. He's 34 now. His mother, Carol, and I divorced when he was 11. It wasn't pretty, but we tried to keep him out of the wreckage. I paid every dollar of child support on time. I paid for his college, 4 years at the University of Oregon, engineering program, which he dropped out of after 2 years to go into real estate development with a friend of his named Brandon. I didn't fight him on that. A man has to find his own way. I just quietly paid off the remaining tuition balance so it wouldn't follow him as debt. I tried to stay present. Weekends when he was a teenager, holidays, phone calls, but Carol had remarried quickly. A man named Glenn, who wore pressed khakis and managed a regional sales territory for a pharmaceutical company. Glenn had a bigger house. Glenn drove a newer truck. Glenn coached Derek's lacrosse team. I don't blame Derek for gravitating toward Glenn. I do blame myself, a little, for not fighting harder to stay visible. By the time Derek was in his mid-20s, the distance between us had settled into something that felt permanent. He'd call on my birthday sometimes. I'd see him at Christmas if the timing worked out. When he had his son, my grandson, Cooper, I found out by text message. A photo, a birth weight, a timestamp. I drove to the hospital anyway. Derek seemed surprised to see me, but he let me hold Cooper for about 10 minutes before he made an excuse about the baby needing to rest. Cooper is 7 now. Bright kid, loves dinosaurs and building things with Legos. I know this because I make it a point to show up. Birthday parties, soccer games when Derek remembers to tell me the schedule, which isn't always. I'd drive the 40 minutes across town without being asked. I'd sit in folding chairs and drizzling rain, watching my grandson run in circles, and feel like the luckiest man in the Pacific Northwest. Derek's real estate business had been going well enough for a few years. He and Brandon were flipping houses, doing some commercial development on the side. Derek drove a Porsche Cayenne and bought a house in Lake Oswego, which is the kind of Portland suburb where people have strong opinions about the right type of wine refrigerator. His wife, Natalie, was pleasant enough in small doses, but had a way of looking at me like I was a piece of furniture that didn't quite match the rest of the room. Last spring, Derek called to tell me about Cooper's kindergarten graduation. Not a real graduation. The kind where 5-year-olds wear tiny paper caps and sing a song about the alphabet. But it was a milestone, and Cooper had been talking about it, and I cleared my calendar 3 weeks in advance. 2 days before the ceremony, Derek called again. "Hey, so about Friday," he said. There was something in his voice I recognized. The same tone he used as a teenager when he was about to ask me to not come to something because his friends would be there. "I'm still coming," I said. "I already told Cooper I'd be there." "Yeah, about that. Natalie's parents are flying in from Connecticut. It's going to be a whole thing with her family. And look, it's a small event, Dad. The gym only holds so many people and we really want to keep it tight." I was quiet for a moment. "I'm his grandfather, Derek." "I know, but her parents haven't met Cooper's teacher yet, and there's a dinner after, and it just gets complicated with me." He didn't answer right away. It's just easier to keep it simple. I said okay. I hung up and sat in my living room for a long time. I didn't call back. I didn't call Cooper. I sent Cooper a card with a $20 bill and a hand-drawn dinosaur on the inside, because that's the kind of thing he liked. I don't know if he got it. Derek never mentioned it. 3 weeks later, Derek showed up at my house, unannounced, on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the backyard pulling up the last of the summer tomato plants when I heard him come to the side gate. He was dressed well, business casual. The kind of outfit that says, I'm doing fine, but also I need something. We went inside. I made coffee. He made small talk for about 4 minutes. Cooper was good. The market was interesting. Portland traffic was terrible. Then he got to it. He and Brandon had overextended on a commercial project in Beaverton, a mixed-use development that was supposed to be their biggest deal yet. Permits had been delayed twice. Costs had ballooned, and one of their anchor tenants had backed out of the lease agreement. They were looking at a shortfall, a significant one. How significant? I asked. We need about $800,000 to cover the gap and keep the project from collapsing. I set my coffee down. Derek. That's not a gap. That's a crater. The project is still viable, Dad. We just need a bridge. 6 months, maybe 8, once we get the anchor lease replaced and the permits cleared. What do you want from me? And that's when he said it. Calm as anything, like he rehearsed it in the car on the way over. I want you to sign over the cabin. We'll sell it, use the equity to cover the shortfall, and when the project closes, I'll buy you something comparable. I looked at him for a moment. You want me to give you my cabin? Not give. It's a bridge, a temporary. You want me to liquidate a 34-year investment so you can cover a mistake you made in a business I had nothing to do with 3 weeks after you told me there wasn't room for me at my own grandson's school event. The air in the kitchen changed. That's not fair, he said. Which part? He shifted in his chair. Look, I know the graduation thing was. I know that wasn't ideal. But this is different. This is serious. This is my family's financial future. Your family. I said it slowly. Not as an accusation, just to hear the words. Yes. And I'm what? Background noise? Dad. 3 weeks ago, I wasn't important enough to take up a chair in a school gymnasium. Today, I'm important enough to hand over a $1.2 million property. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. Not guilty, uncomfortable. There's a difference. You have no right to make this about the graduation. This is about what exactly? What is this about, Derek? That's when he said it. The 31 words. You have no right to that cabin, Dad. You were never really part of this family anyway. Glenn raised me. You just paid for things. I'm not going to pretend that didn't land. It did. Like something dropped from a height. I'd heard variations of it before, in arguments when he was 17, in a voicemail one Christmas when he'd had too much to drink. But hearing it said that plainly, in my own kitchen while he was asking me for money, was something different entirely. I stood up. Not in anger. I just needed to be on my feet. I think you should go, I said. Dad, I'm not yelling at you. I'm not throwing you out. I'm asking you to leave because I need to think. And I can't think while you're sitting in my kitchen telling me I was never part of your family. He left. He didn't apologize on the way out. He sent a text 2 hours later that said I shouldn't have said that. But please think about the cabin. We're running out of time. I thought about a lot of things that night. I thought about a Tuesday in 2003 when Derek was 14 and had his first serious asthma attack at 2 a.m, and I drove 45 minutes in January to sit with him in the ER because Carol had a car in the shop and Glenn was traveling for work. I thought about the tuition checks I wrote without being asked. I thought about the folding chairs in the rain. I thought about Cooper's face the one afternoon I took him to the cabin. He was 4 years old. He saw a doe and 2 fawns at the tree line, and he grabbed my hand and whispered, Grandpa, look, like it was the most sacred thing he'd ever seen. I thought about the fact that Derek wasn't wrong about everything. Not entirely. I had made choices when he was young that created distance. I worked long hours. I wasn't always available in the ways that mattered. I was better at paying for things than being present for them. And somewhere in there, I had helped build the version of Derek who thought those two things were equivalent. That didn't make what he said okay. But it made it something I had to hold alongside the anger, which is harder. I called my attorney the next morning. Her name is Patricia Chen, and she's been handling my estate planning for about 8 years. I told her I wanted to move forward on something we'd discussed a few years back, a charitable gift I'd been considering but hadn't pulled the trigger on. An organization called Friends of the Columbia Gorge runs a youth environmental education program that take kids from underserved communities in Portland, kids who've never left the city, kids who've never seen a forest up close, and bring them out to the Gorge and Mount Hood area for overnight programs. Science education, nature exposure, the kind of thing that sounds small, until you realize some of these kids had never seen a dark sky. I'd been to one of their fundraisers the year before and written a modest check. But that morning, I called Patricia and told her I wanted to do something more significant. I wanted to donate the cabin. She walked me through the process. A charitable donation of real property, structured as a deed transfer to the organization's foundation. Because I'd held the asset for so long and it had appreciated substantially, the tax treatment was favorable. I could take a charitable deduction based on the fair market value, which would offset a significant portion of my income for the next several years. Patricia was thorough. It took about 6 weeks to finalize everything. Appraisal, title work. The organization's board had to formally accept the gift. But by late November, it was done. I didn't tell Derek. I found out he found out. The way most things happen now. Someone saw something online. Friends of the Columbia Gorge put out a press release about a major gift they'd received that would allow them to establish a permanent base camp facility on the Mount Hood property. They mentioned my name. Derek saw it shared in a local Portland business group he belongs to on Facebook. He called me at 7:48 in the morning. You donated the cabin. His voice was flat. Not yelling, just flat in a way that was almost worse. I did. To some environmental nonprofit. A youth education program, yes. Dad. A long pause. I came to you. I told you we were in serious trouble, and instead of helping your son, you gave away over $1 million to strangers. I let the silence sit for a moment before I answered. You told me I was never part of this family, I said. You told me Glenn raised you and I just paid for things. I've been thinking about that for 6 weeks. I told you I shouldn't have said that. You also said it 3 other times. Different words, same meaning. Over about 15 years. I don't think it was a slip, Derek. I think it's what you actually believe. He didn't answer, so I thought about what my role actually is. If I'm not your father in the way that matters, if I'm a checkbook with a name on it, then who am I giving that cabin to? What story is it part of? And I decided it should be part of a story that I actually chose. Those kids have never seen a forest. Some of them have never been more than 10 miles from where they were born. Cooper saw a deer at that cabin when he was 4 and grabbed my hand like it was a miracle. I want other kids to have that. Kids who don't have grandfathers who own cabins. Another long pause. What am I supposed to do? He finally asked. And there was something different in his voice. Not anger anymore. Something that sounded younger. I don't know, I said. That's something you're going to have to work out. With your business partner, with your bank, with Brandon. You're a grown man, Derek. You've been making your own decisions for a long time. This one you'll have to make without my property backing it up. The project is going to collapse. Maybe. And then you'll figure out what comes next. That's how it usually works. He hung up, not slammed, just ended the call. The project didn't collapse, as it turned out. I learned later through the kind of second-hand information that travels through a family, even when people aren't speaking. Derek and Brandon brought in a third partner, restructured the financing, and managed to close out the Beaverton project at a smaller profit than they'd projected, but without going under. Natalie's parents, apparently, contributed some capital. The Connecticut money covered what my cabin would have. Derek and I didn't speak for about 4 months after that phone call. The silence was heavy in the way that silences are, when both people know the thing that was said, but neither one is ready to address it yet. Cooper's 8th birthday was in March. I sent a gift. A good one. A Lego set he'd been wanting. One of the big complicated ones. And a card. I didn't expect to be invited to the party, and I wasn't. Then one Saturday in April, my phone rang. It was Derek. "Cooper wants to call you," he said. No preamble, no explanation. "Okay," I said. There was a rustling sound and then Cooper's voice. "Grandpa, I built the whole Lego set. It took me 4 days. Do you want to see it?" "I would love to see it," I said. We video called for 22 minutes. Cooper walked me through every module of the build, explained each section with the particular intensity that 7-year-olds apply to things that matter to them. I watched his face on the small screen of my phone and thought about deer at a tree line and cold coffee and 31 words in a kitchen. Derek came back on the call when Cooper ran off to find something else to show me. There was a pause. "He asks about you," Derek said. "I'm glad." Another pause. The kind where something is trying to form itself. "I'm sorry," Derek said, "for what I said. About Glenn. About you not being part of the family." He said it carefully, like each word was being handled. That wasn't... I was scared, and I took it out on you in the worst way I could think of. That's the honest version. I sat with that for a moment. I didn't rush to make him feel better. That would have been the easy thing, and it wouldn't have been honest. "I appreciate that," I said finally. "I need you to understand that what you said didn't come out of nowhere. You've been saying versions of it for a long time. The graduation thing, the way you and Natalie have kept me at arm's length from Cooper. That's been building for years. I'm not going to pretend the cabin decision was just generosity. Part of it was, I genuinely believe in that program, and I wanted those kids to have that place. But part of it was me deciding that if I couldn't be your father in the ways that mattered, I could at least be someone's something." Derek was quiet for a long time. "I don't know how to fix it," he said. "You started," I said. "That's usually how it goes." We didn't hug it out. We didn't schedule a big reconciliation dinner. What happened was smaller than that, and probably more real. Derek started sending me Cooper's soccer schedule again. I started showing up folding chairs, drizzling rain, the whole thing. Natalie was cool to me for a while before she wasn't. That took until about August. I went to Cooper's soccer tournament in September. Afterward, Derek and I stood by his car while Cooper ran around the field with his teammates. And Derek said, out of nowhere, "I never thanked you for the college tuition." "You didn't need to," I said. "I know, but I should have." I nodded. We watched Cooper cartwheel badly across the grass, all 7-year-old limbs and no technique whatsoever. "Friends of the Columbia Gorge," Derek said after a minute. "Do they do family programs? Like, could Cooper go out there?" I looked at him. "I can find out." "I think he'd like it," Derek said. "He still talks about the deer he saw. At the cabin. He was 4. I didn't think he'd remember that, but he does." "He grabbed my hand," I said. "Told me to look, like I hadn't been standing right next to him." Derek almost smiled. That sounds like him. I thought about the cabin sometimes. About who was up there now. Which kids were sleeping in those bunk beds. Whether they were seeing deer at the tree line. I didn't miss it the way I thought I would. The loss I'd braced for turned out to be lighter than it looked from the outside. Because the thing that mattered about that place was never the timber or the acreage or the appraised value. It was the hand of a 4-year-old squeezing mine in the quiet. You can't deed that to anyone. It just lives in you and you carry it forward. That's the only inheritance that actually transfers. I've had a lot of time to sit with what happened. Not to replay it and feel sorry for myself. I'm past that. But to actually look at it clearly, the way you can only do after the dust settles and the anger stops being useful. What I keep coming back to is this. Derek didn't become who he was overnight. And I didn't become the kind of father who missed things overnight either. It built slowly, the way most damage does. One skipped weekend, one work trip that ran long, one moment where I chose the easier version of showing up over the real one. I paid tuition instead of asking how school was going. I wrote checks instead of sitting in the car and actually listening. I told myself that providing was the same as being present, and for a long time, Derek agreed with me, because it was convenient for both of us to believe that. What I did with the cabin wasn't revenge. I need to be clear about that. It wasn't punishment, it wasn't a power move, it wasn't me trying to teach Derek a lesson by making him watch. It was just the first completely honest decision I'd made about that property in years. I asked myself who the cabin actually belonged to, not legally, but in terms of meaning. And the honest answer was that it belonged to the version of my life I still wanted to live, not the one where I handed over everything I'd built to cover the consequences of choices I had no part in making. There's something about reaching your 60s that clarifies things. You start to understand that the time you have left is not infinite, and that every decision about where you put your energy is also a decision about who you are. Derek called me a checkbook, and for a long time, I had let him be right. The cabin was my chance to be something else. To be the person who looked at a group of kids who'd never seen a dark sky and said, "Here, this place is yours now. Go find out what the world looks like from the outside of a city." The cause and effect of this whole thing is not mysterious to me. Derek learned early that money solved problems and distance was manageable. I taught him that, so when he hit a real problem, he came looking for money, and when I wasn't there for it, he reached for the cruelest thing he could find to say, that I was never really his father at all. That was the wound talking. I know that now, but knowing it doesn't mean I had to absorb it without consequence. What I've come to believe, and I'm not a philosopher, I'm just a retired structural engineer who spent too many years building things other than the relationship with his son, is that character isn't what you demonstrate when things are easy. It's what you demonstrate when the pressure is on and the easier path is right there in front of you. Derek could have called me months earlier, before the project collapsed, just to talk. He didn't. I could have handed over the cabin and told myself it was love. I didn't. Neither of us took the easier path, and somehow on the other side of all of it, we ended up in a place that feels more honest than anything we had before. Cooper still talks about the deer. Robert still shows up to the soccer games. And somewhere up near Mount Hood, kids who've never held a grandfather's hand in a quiet forest are doing exactly that, looking at something wild and beautiful and learning that the world is bigger than they thought. That's the only math that ever made sense to me.